In this video module, we are going to cover 4.6, use congruent triangles. So again, what does CPCTC stand for? Well, it stands for corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. It tells us that the 6 parts of a triangle, the 3 angles and the 3 sides, are congruent. Now, what must you show in your proof before using CPCTC? Well, you must show the triangles are congruent first. So if you can prove 3 things congruent and use one of your congruent statements, then you automatically know the other 3 pieces will also be congruent. So for example, given angle B is congruent to angle D, and given BC is congruent to DC, how can you prove the left triangle ABC is congruent to the right triangle EDC? Well, we can clearly see in the picture that this is vertical angles. And if we can do vertical angles there, we have 3 relationships. That is a congruence criterion. So angle, side, angle. So we know triangle ABC is congruent to triangle EDC by angle, side, angle. Now, that is the 3 pieces of the puzzle that we know. Well, since those triangles are congruent, we now know that that side and that side's congruent, this side's congruent, and we also know angle E and angle A are also congruent. Therefore, since we have this, we know the other 3 parts. Angle A is congruent to angle E. Segment AB is congruent to segment ED. And segment AC is congruent to EC. So again, CPCTC tells us 6 parts of the triangle are all congruent. Now, today what we're going to be doing is more proofs where CPCTC comes in a lot more. So, it says tell which triangles you can show are congruent in order to prove the statement. What postulate or theorem would you use? Now, it is asking us not to prove triangles congruent, but this piece would be congruent. So JK and LK. So what would we first do? Well, we would first show triangles congruent. So if I can prove that this triangle is congruent to this triangle, then I would know this side and this side are also congruent. So we are working with a reflexive piece here, and that would give me side, angle, side. So I would know that triangle JKM is congruent to triangle triangle LKM. So since I know those triangles are congruent by side, angle, side, I also now know that this piece and this piece are also congruent. So then I can say JK is congruent to LK. So that's the theme of today. We first must show triangles congruent to show parts congruent. Now let's move over to number 3. We now have angle RPQ congruent to TRS. So RPQ, sorry about that, I circled the wrong one. That's what we're trying to prove. We're trying to prove this one is congruent to this one. So if we can get the triangles congruent, then we have it. So the first thing that I notice is that these here are corresponding. So I do know those are corresponding. So I have an angle, and a side. So triangle RPQ, which is the top triangle, is congruent to triangle TRS by angle, side. Since I know that, Now I know that RPQ is congruent to TRS because of CPCTC. So I'm going to say then angle RPQ is congruent to angle TRS.